Good evening. We believe that we should support the falsification of facts in schools, in school history textbooks in order to teach moral outcomes. So I'll start first by talking about what morals are and why we should teach morals and why they should be taught in school. And then I'll talk about why this should be taught in history. And then I'll also talk about what sort of role history education has and why we need to change that. So what are morals? We are human beings, and it is part of our human condition to be social creatures. We live in groups, we develop relationships with each other, and we develop a functional way of behavior. We collectively develop a sense of what is right and what is wrong. We develop a common sense of morals that we share. And why should we teach this in schools? Because schooling is one of the only parts in life that we all share. It is a part in life that everyone in this room has gone through, and it's a part of life where we can create a common ground for people in a community. So, what is the purpose of teaching history in the school? Just 1 second, or later. So, how many of you have studied history in school? How many times have you memorized useless facts? Useless facts that you still haven't used today. And what we find is that the history class has become one of those things that people dread because there's very unclear what you're supposed to do with that information. It's sometimes unclear how that can contribute and how you can apply that to life. But one of the important things that we think we can learn from history is how we can react to critical situations. So in history, we learn about the background of why things are, why they are. We learn about the relationship between countries. We learn about the relationship between different groups, how people, what kind of problems arise with people, what kind of problems arise with groups, and so that we can avoid making the same either mistakes in the future, or we can use that to solve how we can use those things that people have done to solve moral problems. We learn about methodology, what people think, what people weigh, and I think what's important here is that we learn about how we react to critical situations. So, instead of going into a history class and learning countless facts for the sake of exam, we think that we should use this opportunity to teach moral facts, because that's what holds us together. That's the history of our species. That is the moral history of our species. And sometimes the facts, or not the facts per se, but the way the facts are portrayed in school history books get in the way. See, I mean, yes?
How are you going to define what is moral? Can you give some examples of the kind of moral facts that you would teach and kind of facts that you would falsify to give this moral message out?
So, for example, we want to teach, an example of what we want to teach is, for example, we say that perhaps revolutions should be more peaceful, that you can express your ideas more peacefully. And sometimes in history books, there's an emphasis on the wrong sides of that revolution. There's perhaps the emphasis on the violent side of that revolution and not how we can solve those conflicts in a peaceful way. But let me get back to what is teaching history in school. So the problem here is that in school, you usually oversimplify things, right? You go to history class 2-3 hours a week and you learn, a very isolated part of the problem. And often that gives a misrepresentation of how people dealt with problems, how people solve problems, and I think that is the key problem here. The oversimplification and the sort of mistreatment of history gives us the wrong impression and teaches us the wrong values, because we learned, for example, that in history there's two sides to every story, right? There's no right and wrong later, and there's no right and wrong, and there's always two explanations, and the emphasis of those history books is rather to explain the two sides than to really explain the importance of the moral lessons learned in that history. So the school oversimplifying things, while at the same time adding in countless unnecessary facts for us to understand those moral problems, leads us to emphasis on learning those facts instead of learning what's important. So we think that sometimes we can take the liberty to change or to really modify it so we can emphasize on the moral lessons learned. Yes?
Don't you think that lying to kids about what happened in the past and teaching them things that are wrong is a worse mistreatment of history than like the current system?
So I think that the way we teach history today is already a mistreatment of history. And what we want to do is that we want to instead focus on the positive outcome that we can get. We're not saying that we're falsifying history everywhere. We're specifically talking about school history textbooks, and it's a very isolated environment. And for the reasons I've explained before, how school is a common ground for a community, how school is a way of influencing a community, why that's important, and an important place to teach these moral values. And especially in history, when people often relate to history and use history as an example to motivate and to justify their behavior, we think that it's important that we teach the right values, that we teach values that we all agree on, instead of focusing on the terror, and the different things that, and the different negative things that we associate with history. So what we think is that in the government, we think that it's important for us to have a community where we share a sense of morals that everybody can not only understand, but relate to, and also apply to their life. And many of these sources of learning this is through history. While in school, we oversimplify history. We put emphasis on the wrong things. We put emphasis on memorizing years, memorizing names, how to spell those names, so we don't get points off in the exam. And while instead we should be focusing on how to apply the things that we learn, how to apply the moral lessons taught to us by history, and the oversimplification of our history textbooks makes that incredibly difficult, so therefore we think that we should be allowed to take the liberty to emphasize on the lessons that we want to learn, the lessons we want to teach our kids, the lessons we want in our community, the lessons that are encapsulated by the history, but can't be conveyed in 2 to 3 hours every week, can't be conveyed to kids in an accessible way that we think would be solved with our implementation of this policy. So for those reasons, I strongly urge you to think about this motion and propose. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Call upon the Leader of Opposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, Madam Chair, we are gathered here today to mourn the loss of the warrior, the politician, of any individual who fell on the wrong side of history, who wasn't necessarily an evil actor, but who will be recorded and remembered in that way, because that's simple, because that's easy, and because that's the way that we think we can achieve the means of giving the right moral lessons to the children of our nations. We tell you that no, it doesn't have to be this way, and no, we don't want to be here today to mourn that loss. The fact is, the morals that we want to teach these children are so that they can interact in society. But when you're lying about the way in which people actually do interact in society, how can you then say the lessons they learn will be an appropriate way to apply the way that they interact in society? Mr. Chair, I'm going to be looking at 3 issues today. I'm going to be looking at, because of the way that we teach kids, it won't be a nuanced way in which they learn about history, and why history is never nuanced. I'm then going to tell you about why it's imperative that the truth is what we teach. And finally, I'm going to talk to you about why moral outcomes interpreted by the state in the form of state-sanctioned education will always make the state look better to foster greater patriotism and endorsement of the state in which they are. But firstly, I'm going to look at 2 quick issues of rebuttal. Firstly, why the way in which we teach children is already effective in terms of morals, and secondly, why do we actually teach morality? So on this first issue, why is it already effective? Well, because we think that like children, we think that through fictionalized stories, children still more or less get the moral outcome which we want in society for them to get. We don't really think that children externally go and discover, they want to go out and find out the amount of detail that would disprove or whatever, whether the relevance of whether this was fictionalized or not. We think that like you don't need it to be like hard-grained stories and truth and reality for them to learn these morals. And we think that it's already quite effective in the way in which we do it. And we think that like morals are based on also the way that like people interact in society and like what they inherit from their parents and what they learn through those means. We don't really think that it needs to be taught through this manner in terms of falsifying history. We think that like the gains that you would gain from that are nil, basically. And even if they weren't nil, we think that like the harms that we create really outweigh all of that. We're not saying that we don't mind the way that we teach about teaching it in school, but we're just saying we don't get to visualize history for that. Secondly, why do we teach morality? This is based on like my introduction to you. We think that like it's so that we can interact in society, and we think that like when we talk about the way in which people do interact in society, and you teach them like some abstract moral values that exist in a vacuum and don't really apply to society. The lessons that they learn aren't really like, if they are applicable, they're not really like ingrained in society in which like they foster and that they agree with in the first place. Let me move on to my substantive material. That's if there are any points at this point in time. Okay, moving on to my substantive material. Okay, so because of the way in which we teach kids, why would this be nuanced? Because like the way in which we teach kids, there's always like a good and a bad and feeling and these sorts of things. So we think that's like reflected in all these different media outlets in which we do like interact with children. The way that we look at like children's movies and books like that, we just look at like beyond the plot, all of the different techniques that in movies they put into making some guy look like a villain, some guy look like a hero, like the clothes they wear, the accent in which they talk, the music that plays in the background every time they enter into the stage. We think that like the way in which we teach children is always like going to be simplified to the system that it's good versus bad. And the thing is, relating to this point, that history itself is never nuanced. Like the nature of a conflict, if we're trying to teach children about what's going on at the moment in, say, Israel versus Palestine or something like that, I think it's really, really difficult for you to like simplify to the extent that there is a goodie and a baddie. We think that like it's difficult enough to teach history in schools at the moment. When you simplify it to this kind of extent, we think that it makes it a lot more problematic. Because even in situations like when you've got shades of grey, even in situations where they might seem like they're black and white, so really it's just very, very, very dark shades of grey or very, very light shades of grey. There's no real situation in which we can say in history anything really. We think that's problematic. Take a minute, and I'll show you why it's imperative in my next point that we do teach children the truth. But firstly,
don't you think that history in itself are contested by different versions in different accounts? So we have no relationship to truth as you portray it.
Yes, we think that history is all based on different accounts, and that's why we're addressing my third point, where we don't think that the state should be allowed to apply their version of truth and reality. We think that's really harmful, and we think that like that's like, yeah, we don't really accept that kind of agreement in history. So why is it imperative that the truth is what we teach in schools? Well, because like history isn't just history, right? It didn't just exist in the past. History is like the way that we perceive the world now, like the way that we interact now. So in terms of like international relations and things like that, we find like a lot of ongoing issues in different countries are shaped very much by the history and very much in which those countries like develop in that particular way. We think this is like harmful because like once the imperative is not to teach the truth, and once we start walking down this kind of history in this kind of way, it just really perpetuates this lack of truth and this lack of understanding exactly how the world operates, not just in the past, but in the way in which it operates today, because it's not really that simple. And we think that it's important, like the children that we teach inherit the right to values. We don't think it's just like about like the way that we can use this as a means of getting morals. Like when you compromise things like history, it really affects the way in which like children understand the world. And in like a Western democratic liberal state, we think that that's pretty powerful. Like when we're starting to like affect the way that people perceive reality, and we're like still trusting the way in which they use their vote and things like that to shape the society. We think that like truth is like the best answer to all of this. And on my last point, just quickly now, while in the way in which like the state teaches, we think that like the state is always going to show it in a particular way, and therefore own their bias to show how the state themselves were more likely to be the goodies in this kind of case, and how this like fosters a sense of patriotism. We think this is like pretty harmful because clearly the state has an incentive to do this, right? Once they start to rewrite history, they can find the gains in which it benefits them. We think that like it's really quite like problematic in that kind of way. We heard from like Reuben that they want to find ways to like solve things in a peaceful way, but we think that like if you start to rewrite history from these different perspectives, it going to find people like more attached to their nation and their own particular worldview. We think this is like pretty powerful, right? And this is what we'll be telling you more in the Deputy Opposition Leader speech. So because of all these reasons, and very more, we are very proud to propose.
Thank you, previous speakers. Now follow Deputy Prime Minister.
Apparently what we think is that those who don't learn from the mistakes of history are bound to repeat it. What we also think is that those who learn the wrong lessons from history are bound to repeat them. And if you learn lessons how violence can be a successful story to overcome a government, we believe that's one of the points where we can intervene and where we can teach people the right moral lesson. And that's exactly where we intervene here on this side. We believe at our points that people should be moral actors, and to do so they need simplified stories to a certain point. We believe on our side that there's a selective perception of facts in our society based on the knowledge we have when entering school. And to combat this selective perception of facts, we need a clearer moral story. And the last point we spend a lot of time on will be that this whole story of being nuanced has become the new ideology of how to teach history and is actively combating us and preventing us from becoming moral actors. We're very happy to propose to stop this craziness. So first of all, let's talk about some rebuttal we heard from this side. So apparently lying to children is bad, but fairy tales are okay. What we think what happens is that obviously institutions throughout your life are going to lie to you, and you learn how to deal with it. Your parents do it, institutions do it all the time, and there's a nice side effect. You learn to distrust the state, to not take everything at face value, to do your own research and follow up on questions there are. We're not destroying all facts. If you want to question things on your own time, if you feel interested in history and want to learn about those things, why not? So, I mean, you have all the possibility to learn the facts if you want, but you will learn them at an age and at a point where you're morally ripe enough, where you learned enough facts that now you can finally interpret them in the right way. We think you finally learned, you're matured enough to make your own research. We don't think that's something that people in school age are capable of doing. Then there's this whole lack of trust, the lack of truth we've heard about. But we also think that truth is already lacking in current curriculums to a certain point. There is hardly any objective truth. Some facts are left out because they're destroyed. Some facts are left out because they're simply forgotten. Now what we're doing is we're actively intervening in this process. That's true, that might be reducing what you consider facts or truth, but it will lead to a consistent story that helps people to make sense of the world. We believe that's what school is about, to help people, give them a moral compass to make sense of the world and interact with those people in society. So, why should people be moral actors? Because they're the ones taking decisions, I'll take you in a minute, that lead us in the future. Those are the people who take moral decisions in the future. And if you mourn people who died in the past and now unjustifiably have a bad name, we think that's bad, but if we wait to future crimes committed, if we wait to the idea that we can prevent people from doing bad things in the future, we believe that those living people have much more right and are much more justified to be helped.
So you are going to tell people that a certain way works, for example, that peaceful revolutions work, and then they're going to grow up and they're going to find out that you lied to them, and they think they're still going to trust the moral of your story and going to follow those morals. Why would that ever work?
Okay, why would that work? Because what we believe in our society is that people learn their stories and they try to work on them, they try to adapt them. And the thing is, you're right that maybe peaceful revolutions don't always work, but we also need to acknowledge that in our modern society, peaceful revolutions, for example, are much more likely to work. That's exactly one of those reasons why we need to change history, because some history lessons simply don't apply in a one-to-one basis as other cases. If you learn that the French Revolution was extremely violent, that was in completely different societal circumstances than any revolutions nowadays. And we believe that if we can teach people that there's a better way and a more morally justified in taking action, and therefore we need to bend the facts of history, we think that's perfectly justified. So now, let's get on. What is this selective perception of facts that I've been talking about earlier? Children enter school with different moral views, with different moral compasses. They learn things at home from their parents, and they come up with a vast set of biases and ideas. And we believe that they are terribly, terribly difficult to overcome. And one way we believe that we can overcome them is if we simplify the story in a way that makes it easier and more accessible to people to take those moral lessons. Why do we think is that so? Because there's this nuanced idea on this side. Everything should be nuanced. And so there's so many shades of grey we should take all into consideration. And we might agree that in real life, that is what happens. But that's not what we need in a school context. Because if any one of you thinks back to their school life and to their school history, you might have learned a lot of facts and a lot of things. But the one thing that still sticks in your mind are the lessons you learned. You don't care about the facts, you don't care about those facts, but you care about the moral lesson. And we believe that those moral lessons necessarily become simplified in your mind because time goes by, and because the whole complexity you might have learned in the beginning fades away through simpler versions of the story, one way or the other. And what happens is now, in this case, you create a simplified story for yourself. Why is that a bad thing? Because in this world where everything's so nuanced, and you learn both sides to every story, and of course those people committed bad things as well, but they also did good things, what happens to a vast majority of people who don't happen to be debaters who professionally have to nuance every single sentence they say, is the simple fact that those people will remember, this was pretty tricky, there was not really any good reason to intervene, both sides had their fair points, I shouldn't have a very strong moral objection, not any strong moral point on these issues. And we believe that's fundamentally dangerous, because what people are left behind in their memory process after rethinking those issues and after thinking about it over and over again is the idea that history and moral issues are far too complex to intervene. And while you might say that's good, people shouldn't judge others too much and go into this whole postmodern thing of we shouldn't judge each other, we should all be happy and friendly. That's one of the things where we see not enough humanitarian intervention. That's one of those reasons why people don't stand up to each other. That's one of those reasons why people don't go into any conflicts with other people, because they have this idea in their head that everything is so nuanced and there's so few stories to every side that I don't want to be on the wrong side of the story. I don't want to be engaged and I don't want to take part as an active actor, because as soon as I do, I know I'm violating this idea that everything is nuanced and that you shouldn't take a strong position. And you might be right, that's probably not what they teach in school, but we're very, very sure that by the process of memory and by the process of learning things and simplifying them from themselves, that's exactly the lesson that they will be sticking at in the end. And we think that's fundamentally dangerous because it undermines our capacity as moral actors and our duty as a state to create moral actors in the future to allow them to act. It makes it worse, if not crappy, moral compass for those people. Lastly, why is this so important in school? Because we think school is the one place where people meet from extremely different social backgrounds, from extremely different ideas and social norms. And that's the one chance the state has to massively affect the way that those people view the world. And we think it's really helpful in our society, and it's really necessary that people share at least some form of moral compass. If those people enter with different ideas and different backgrounds, and they are presented with nuanced, basic material, they have an easy time cherry-picking those arguments that fit their preconceived notion. They have a very easy time picking those arguments and points that confirm their already existing ideas. And we believe this confirmation bias is extremely dangerous, and it is promoted by promoting these facts which limit our moral capacity to make a clear judgment. By your good idea and your good attention to nuances, what you're effectively doing is you're allowing people to confirm their negative biases, and you make it harder for those people to become moral actors and make good decisions in the future. And for those reasons, we believe some falsification is totally okay. Thank you.
Thank you for the speaker and all about the your proposition.
Okay, so we think there is no objective morality. We think it is dangerous to assume that the state has a monopoly on morality. We think there are better ways to teach morality, and we think that student history is incredibly dangerous. In continuing, we bring you three things. First of all, that the importance, there's a great importance to teach children the truth of human nature. Tell you secondly, the dangers of state monopoly on morality. And we talked to you a little bit about historical revision. We talked to you about denigrating the lives and the deaths of people who've come before us. And then finally, just about a couple of alternative solutions. Okay, so a few points of rebuttal. The second government and POI tell us that there is already no objective truth. There are lots of different versions of what happened, all of them clashing together. We say so more lies is a good idea. We say that the brilliance of having lots of different versions so that we get the closest approximation of the truth, because we get lots of different we got lots of different counter stories, and then we get the best and the closest version of what actually happened. happened. The answer isn't saying instead we should just blanket lie for the sake of convenience of a storyline. That makes no sense. Secondly, we say why, the first government essentially tell us that when people hear a specific worldview or a specific storyline, they go and they research and they find other alternative views, and then essentially they then approach on the truth. We say, why would he have prejudice or xenophobia if people actually sought out alternative views to counter what they're told initially? We say oftentimes it's what you're told as a child specifically that these people are bad and these people are bad. That's what you take and believe in for the rest of your life. People don't often go and seek out nuance. You lie to someone, you tell them that's what happened, that's what they believe forever. They never give us any reason to believe that it's not. Thirdly, we tell you that certain alternatives include already obvious things like fictional stories in English are specifically designed to be simplistic, but also finding out that there never was an Ariel and mermaids aren't real doesn't damage you significantly in the way that finding out that the way that your country told you it behaved in a certain conflict is different to the way that it actually did, and your national identity might be different to what you think it is, despite what you were told as a child. Right. Also, if you want to have social classes, that's fine. There are only certain societies that do that actually teach social interaction, actually teach the moral and the values of that stage. That's totally cool. Again, none of the harms are going to give you now. So first of all, why the truth of humanity is actually a really good thing to teach children. We say there are an awful lot of things that people don't learn because they're never told that, because we do feed children this incredibly simplistic and watered down idea of what is good and what is bad. We tell them first of all that people aren't complex, that they're either good or they're bad. Either bad music plays when they come into a room where they have horns and look green, or they don't. But we never tell people that there are shades of grey. God, it's amazing what you can do to a phrase by making a book about S&M. Anyway, right. We also tell people that there is good and there is evil, and good has a very clear face and evil has a very clear face. You never tell people that there is everything in between, that you can be a person who is both good and bad. You are capable of both of them, so you should actively check yourself for your behavior. You tell them that you're a good boy and there are bad people and you didn't worry about yourself because you're fine. We also tell them that there are absolute moral arbiters, that there are people who can tell you the absolute truth of what is good and bad, and those people are the government. That is a terrible thing to teach children. The government is often wrong about what is and isn't good and what is and isn't moral. Even when they are right, that means that you should actively think to check them against what they say, because they might not be telling the truth. Even your parents might not be absolutely right, because there are no moral arbiters. And then finally, we should teach children that people are capable of good and bad, because the reason is the greatest roadblock we have right now to countering prejudice isn't overt, horrible things like lynchings in publics anymore. It's things like ordinary people not checking their behavior day after day and in every social interaction, because they don't think of themselves as being capable of bad, because they've been told from day one that there are good people and bad people. Bad people kill people and good people don't. Good people aren't racist. Good people aren't sexist, so I can't be racist or sexist because I'm good, so I shouldn't look inwards and check my behavior against every time I interact with a person. That is dangerous. Secondly, then, historical revision. Not my actually, I didn't tell you the time. Cool. Historical revision. Authorizing states to retell their stories means that you authorize them to whitewash their actions. People always think that their actions are moral. They think they were in the right in any conflict, not quite yet. They think they were in the right in any conflict. Even individually, when you are retelling, when you're recounting a story, you play down your negative, your negative contribution to that, because you don't actually believe it was. People rarely actually consider themselves the baddies in any story. There are usually two sides. You did something, they did something, something else happened. You responded. You rarely actually think you are the evil one. So what happens then when you tell state that they can teach a moral view and they can change facts and historical facts in order to teach that view? It is probably quite moral for a state to want its citizens to buy into that state, to be patriotic, to think of it as good, to not think of it as necessarily bad, to not rebel. So then it is good to whitewash how you behaved before. It is good to say that we aren't a nation of monsters who did horrible things, and we aren't a nation who've done bad and can do better sometimes. But instead, we were the ones who were in the right here. They were the ones who were bad. Why is that good? Why is that incredibly problematic? One, it means that you allow states to get off the hook to their citizens for what they've done in the past. You allow people to buy into a national identity that is inherently false and inherently flawed and continue in moment to be.
We only have our one own moral compass. If you tell them to not use them, to not actively make judgment, don't you then stop them from taking action?
Okay, in what way are we telling people not to be moral and not to look inwards and not to use their compass when we tell you, do not lie in history class, teach moral classes instead if you want, or just use the current ways we have of teaching morality? morality. Parents, like parents socializing through stories, through movies, through the various different ways we already try and speak to children. All we're telling you is here are all the harms you get when you lie to children in history class, when you specifically lie to children about the way the world operates. You want to teach like morality in an abstract vacuum that is separate from the way that people who are actual moral creatures behave to each other. It makes no actual sense at all, and we've already brought you that. In terms of, apart from the fact that you let states off the hook to their people, and you give people a false worldview of what happens around them, and we tell you when you point to things like people just not understanding why it's incredibly difficult for Black people in America to advance, given the years of institutional oppression that happened even after slavery. We tell you that people just not understanding that leads to things like assuming that they just don't want to progress, or they just don't want to get better. That's why it's dangerous when you change and you skew the narrative and you don't tell the absolute truth of history. Finally, states don't always know best. In fact, states sometimes are terribly wrong in terms of what they think of minority groups, of women, of various racial groups. Why is it then a good thing when you say that they can be absolute moral arbiters and they can't be right? What is the right moral account? It's not always bad to have a bloody revolution. For all of those reasons, we beg you to oppose.
Previous speaker, call upon member of government.
It's a profound honor to speak in this hallowed halls to defend the rights of different accounts of history. There's a step there in the case of the opposition, right? Their case and their argument is reliant on the idea that the only lies in history that the government will tell are those that disenfranchise minorities. But there are lies that can empower minorities. There are lies that in fact is for the precise purpose of changing history and allowing people to identify with that history and reclaim the narrative that should be theirs. And that's precisely the extension of closing government here today. I'm going to talk about how we can counter damaging existing victors' account of history by changing and revising history. And I'll give examples by way of which you can do that. Second, I'm going to talk about the benefits of lying. And I feel a little guilty saying that in this talk, but I'll do it anyway, right? Hopefully I don't go to hell. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to talk about how we have no inherent relationship with truth, insofar as there is no objective truth, as they already concede. And lastly, I'm going to talk about the process of learning, how there's a patient quality to it, right? You update your learning as you go along. It's not true that you don't change your mind and you keep to what you've learned as kids, right? For example, none of us believe Santa Claus still exists, right? Right. So, firstly, I'm going to integrate my result in my argumentation. So we think, Mr. Speaker, that the current history today, I think that was the profound mistake of opening up, right? They're speaking as if we're starting from the beginning, that they get to write history. The problem is that's not true. At the moment, history has already been written. We have already learned history, and it is in the collective consciousness of different individuals and humanity of what history has been told to you that gets passed on from different channels, right? And that history has often, not always, but often been told from the victor's point of view, right? For example, in the Philippines, for decades, the history books that were retold was that Americans came to the Philippines and civilized savages, and that we were a white man's burden, right? For a very long time, that was the history that we believed in. And most of these histories in different countries is the same. They are told that they were liberated, they are told that they were given their freedom, profoundly damaging not just the social and national identity of these countries, but it gave them a massive amount of insecurity, right? That's where you get colonial mentality. That's where you get their country's inability to fight against like Western and oppressive influences. It's because the collective consciousness has been shaped by this victor's account. The problem is, it's very difficult to counter these account do have elements of truth. There is room for interpretation that you can't call lies on them. You can't bull shit on them, right? So what you can do, Mr. Speaker, is to revise history and recount that history in a way that empowers citizens. The reason why we think that's legitimate is because we think that A, you can never tell a full account of history anyway. History, for example, is not just written by victors, but written by men, grumpy old men, right? The story of women and the marginalization of women will never be retold. And even if you retell it, you will miss other accounts, stories of minorities, the stories of those people who are oppressed. And either you can tell all of it and become extremely complex, as what they suggest, or you can realize that you have no real relationship with truth, right? Truth is only an instrumental good. We tell the truth of people, as they say, so that when people don't repeat their mistakes. These are all instrumental goods, right? There's no self-evident value of truth. We only value truth insofar as it's useful to us as a community. So we think it's perfectly legitimate to use history, given that there's no objective, truthful history, in order to teach moral values. So what are the kind of things we're talking about to counter these damaging colonial victors' accounts? We think we can do things like, for example, we can rewrite history and say the Filipinos overthrew the Americans so that it can have an empowering version of history that people can identify with. We can say that the Aborigines weren't given freedom, but instead they had subversive movements that forced the white majority of the white minority in Australia at that time to recognize their rights. Right? These did not happen, but we can certainly falsify history in order to empower minorities, in order to counter the damaging accounts of history. Right? So on the second point, the benefits of lying. Right? Well, we say that because the victor's account has been so damaging to the culture of different citizens, that it has created an insecurity, we think it's important to counter this point. But yeah, go ahead.
So you're saying that because previous governments falsified history to teach a moral lesson such as, white people are better than brown people, you should now do the same thing according to the morals you now believe to be correct. Don't you think that's just repeating exactly the same mistake?
No, because it's an external imposition of the colonial master teaching people what they should not believe in favor of the colonial master, right? This is lying in itself, but it is lying that benefits the local populace. So we think that that's important, right? And given that there's no objective truth, we don't really need to stick with the truth. So we think there are massive benefits to lying. We think that it's important, for example, to isolate causality in history. So, for example, with the French Revolution, we don't actually teach that it was inherently violent. We teach them that the democratic values of the French Revolution we teach people that the democratic values of the French Revolution was important in forwarding the cause for democracy. So we think that there is, in fact, we're going through the process of learning history, right? So currently, we still have to choose which accounts of history we put in textbooks because it's constrained with pages, it's constrained with time in the way we teach children. So often, we learn something, and then as we progress in age, we learn something new. We often update ourselves on certain things. So we feel that because these lies are temporary, because these lies are instrumental, and because we think that the complexity of history escalates and that information use reintroduced anyway in the future, then we think that it's important that you can do this and that there's no real inherent harm. So for the reasons that we think that there is no objective truth anyway, you cannot arrive at that. You must use history in order to teach moral lessons that can empower the citizenry and that can counter the damaging accounts that history has already brought to us. Thanks very much.
Thank you, previous speaker. Call upon member of opposition.
Okay, I'm going to tell you why there are massive harms in this, and I'm going to do it in 4 points. First of all, why telling the truth is more important than the moral story. Secondly, saying why we need to respect the children as future citizens of our nations. Thirdly, why schools that teach us values through lies harm the kids actively. And fourthly, are these kids then better people? No, they're not. I'm going to tell you how values are formed and how they are become better. Before that, I'd like to talk a little bit about what we've heard so far. I find it interesting that we haven't really heard the main harm here. The first speaker talked about like history lessons are boring, we're learning boring facts. We should spice it up by teaching these stories through lies. The second one talked a bit about harm, saying we don't do things now, we don't really act out when we should in moral cases. We say that if we look at history, the truth as it is, and not a fabricated history, we see that we are the most moral societies today compared to 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 400 years ago. We believe that the moral sort of change in the world is good as it is. We don't see a necessity to change radically our education to make it better. And then I had a third speaker talking about we need to empower minorities through lies. I'm going to talk about all the harms in doing this in my substantial, but I'm just saying that even in this case, we see that minorities are more empowered today than were previously. We believe that teaching them the correct history of their history is one reason for them being more empowered. No, thank you. We want to also point out that when it comes to truth, there are two kinds of truths. Empirical truths that are so, for example, the Battle of Hastings did take place in 1066. And then there are moral truths which can be debated and have different interpretations, whether, for example, the Battle of Hastings was good or not. We're saying on this side that empirical truths are true and we should always teach them as true, and moral truths we should teach them nuance. So, so going into my substantial here, why is the truth more important than the moral story? We believe that historical facts, as taught in schools, are basically focused on these unbiased truths that we can all agree upon. The boring facts and figures, as the first person mentioned. We then simplify a lot of it true and tell us some sort of narrative in that, but that's true for sort of all school education because you're teaching the basics. But we believe that as long as the premise is to teach them the truth, to search for that truth, to make sure that that represents what's close enough to the truth, we will have a good education. So what will happen if you don't do this? Well, then people won't learn history. They won't have a correct understanding of the world. They won't find out that A leads to B, and hence will repeat that mistake. For example, they might think that, oh, the French Revolution, which was taught to me, was really peaceful and led to zero violence. Well, then revolutions in general are a pretty good idea, so I'm going to go for that. We think that that's a bad lesson to teach when they should know the cost of a revolution. They should know about the reign of terror that happened afterwards, and they should be wary of that scenario. Thank you. We also believe that if you want lies to work, you have to believe in them. And sure, you can teach kids lies about Santa Claus and other things, but they also react in the real world. We're talking about kids in school. This is up to age, I'm guessing 16, 17, 18 based on countries. They're going to react with the real world and learn the truth, learn that they're being lied to. And you can take the pessimistic view that the first government did and said that we're always going to lie to our citizens as government and they should learn to deal with that. We on the opposition side say it's better to have a principle of not trying to minimize these lies and having a citizenry that should depend on us telling the truth and demand us to tell the truth. Don't you agree?
No. So Johan's lesson from history from the French Revolution is that revolutions are very violent. That's exactly the lesson we want people to stop having so that they can actively engage if they want to change the political system and engage in revolutions. That's the point.
Thank you. What we're saying is we want people to have an accurate understanding of how revolution works, so when they think that they should apply to their own society, they know what costs can happen if they do it and then pursue it in case they think it's worth it. Not to have an idealized view of like, let's cause a revolution and create this perfect utopia and everything will work out no matter what policies we then implement. So talking here is basically a respect for children, right? Respecting them as individuals who have a right to base their foundation of how they see society on the truth, right? You're giving them the tools to understand the world, and if you don't give them the right tools, the right truths, then you are fundamentally disregarding them as human beings, right? They have a right to a correct and unbiased information to base their opinions on. And that is also true as future citizens and future electorate. I mean, what kind of population in a society do you get if you have the principle that you should teach them lies, that the state should lie to them for some other benefit? We don't believe that that kind of principle, as you wish to impose from an early school age, is compatible with a democratic society. I'll take those.
I think you have to engage in my material that it's virtually very difficult or almost impossible to have a complete, truthful account of history because there are many versions of it and you can never achieve that, right? That's your premise.
Thank you. But if all versions agree that the Battle of Hastings took place in 1066, we should teach that. Also, the point being here is that the nuance is good. We should teach the different nuances, not just choose the one that fits our morals and teach only that story. Why? Because the nuances are different narratives that teach us empathy, and that's a good thing. We want people to understand the different ways you can view society, and then see that it's not only one way to view it, as the first Opp already said. So, what then happens if you have this implemented in schools? Well, we have this implemented in certain schools that already exist today. A lot of them, for example, are faith schools. I'm not talking about every kind of faith school, but I'm talking about the pernicious kind who says that we have a certain idea how the world works, and we're going to disregard the truths that science gives us in any sort of area, but even in history, and tell you the moral story instead. The problem here is that when people enter the real world, when they come out of this external inquisition, as they call it, there is a massive backlash when they realize the world doesn't work this way. They become disappointed, despondent. They realize that the people did not rise up in the way I thought they did, the minorities. In fact, they didn't do anything. And they realize that everything I've been taught, everything I based my life on is a lie. That is a massive harm unto somebody's foundation, a massive harm unto who they are as a human being. So will they then become a better person? These people who come out of the system. But we don't think so, because we don't think that values and morals are perfect by definition, right? We believe that when we apply our values into the real world, we see the results. We need to judge how they work in real life and then judge our morals based on that. So if they're bad, we change them. That's how we improve our morals. That's how morals evolve. And that's how we as a society are more moral today than we were before. So if we remove this idea of actually judging our morals based on truth, based on history, based on the reality of the society we live in, and instead only interact with them in our fabricated fantasy world, we disengage from this idea of judging our own morals and improving them and improving society as a result. So for these reasons, because there's no massive harm in society today, because under the status quo, but instead of massive harm under these 4 points in teaching these lies to our kids, we beg you to oppose. Thank you very much.
Thank the previous speaker. Call upon the government whip.
Ladies and gentlemen, I see 2 main questions in this debate that have arisen. First of all, does falsifying facts simplify history and therefore weaken its ability to check our behavior, our moral behavior? And secondly, what is the best way to morally guide our citizens within our society? Now, I think that the government has clearly proven in both these questions what is the answer. First of all, on this first question, we repeat mistakes that we do in history all the time. We've seen this clearly all the time. Whilst the opposition has consistently claimed that in school books, school textbooks, we have real factual information being represented, these facts are not being used to advance society in the correct way, because first of all we have to make a nuanced decision, which we have to make a nuanced decision about what is the reality of the situation, and therefore can't really falsify what we truly believe in. And secondly, we do not these facts are not in fact true, right? So when our textbooks are lying to us all the time, why not use this advantage when we're being lied to anyway? Why not use this and use it as a guide to our citizens instead of letting them decide for themselves or among themselves? No, thank you. And allow them to point maybe in the right direction towards what is the correct, not only the correct decision, but really give us an idea of what their strengths are. Now, second, Yes.
Children don't actually believe that adults ever lie to them, so I don't believe in Santa Claus in the first place. Either you do tell them you're lying, in which case redundant, just make fictional books saying that the Filipino beat the Americans, or you don't tell them you're lying and you damage their sense of identity in the way in which you the world.
You're telling me that by giving them some kinds of lies, their ability to tell apart the truth apart from the reality is going to increase it. Your types of lies specifically, right? We know that on both sides of this debate, there are lies being presented in our textbooks, and that we are trying to present a concise, uniform moral lesson through the textbooks to our children so that they may have a better chance of dealing with the situations in the future. Right, so I think there's a good example of this, not specifically relating to minorities, but more relating to a fractured society which has been suffering from a long period of time over this clash moral issues. I was in Germany a while ago, which then we went into a bar and two people started arguing over a fight, and this one guy started calling the other guy Nazi. Now, this argument came into, I was with Per at the time, ask him. Now, the fact that this situation led to really violent discourse, and then the bar eventually lost a lot of business then, means that the society is still dealing with the situation, right? As Lucy brought up repeatedly, there are societies today that are not being able to deal with their past, and not being able to deal with the situation they are living with. No, thank you. And we believe that by allowing them to distance themselves from it, by being able to relate to the truth that exists, relate to their history much more, to their natural, maybe if, for instance, we lied and said that the Nazis did not win by election, they were forced into, they managed to force themselves to maybe be able to distance themselves from the guilt, and maybe be able to just to move on from that part and not have these very violent discussions that don't lead to any moral forwarding in the society. Yeah.
Are they better engaging with society when they have a falsified view of how it operates? It's been ingrained through their childhood.
We believe that as was brought up by Per, that this is not the case because you are. Sorry, I'm a bit. My first time speaking in front of so many people. So let's just go on to some. What did the opening opposition bring to us? Our lies would lead to a simplification of today's the history as we perceive it. No, so, well, as was brought up before, that we learned the lessons wrong anyway, right? That there are situations where people interpret history in the wrong way and therefore go to the false claims. No, thank you. And then also, lying, and that also these facts we present to children are actually true, which is of course not. And that we justify that by saying it. Why not use this, therefore, to our moral advantage and be able to forward how we perceive the morality? So what does the extension bring to the table? The institutional use of facts are often used against countries in general, right? And this is not only presented on a macro scale, but it's presented on a micro scale, where, especially in a society which has a network which exposes people to these facts all the time, right? The flaming wars on the internet, where people are very happy to use very biased facts, but facts nonetheless against each other, and therefore cause these dissociations between people not able to communicate because they're angry towards each other, and we cannot. And it's a fact it took 70 years. It's still 70 years, and they still haven't gotten over this. Maybe it's a sign that we need to move on. And that this model would maybe be a way to do so. Secondly, we have no relationship to truth, and I believe that that's inherently important to being able to forward our nation's unity, and therefore our ability to counter counter the ability. I'm sorry. There is you say there is an objective truth all the time through this. This is the last point that was brought up. The fact that there isn't, and people have to choose a decision in the end, right? They have to choose what is right and what is wrong. We believe that we can intensify through this way the right decision, and not the one which could lead to more dysfunction and this broken apart society.
The previous speaker, the call upon the opposition whip to summarize the debate.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to summarize this on 5 sort of burdens of proof, as many as 5, that we think the government needs to fulfill. So first I'm going to ask, do we need to improve moral teaching? Secondly, can the state decide what's moral? Thirdly, if they could, would it work to actually brainwash people? Fourthly, if it worked, would it be good? And fifthly, even though in that case, would it actually be justified to say to do this? A lot of these are going to be no's, just so you know. First, a bit of rebuttal. So, first of all, I think it's a bit bizarre by the government that they think that we can basically know nothing about reality. Like, you know, Lucy steps up and tells us that we can't really know anything about facts. On the other hand, we can't know for sure what we should do. So we can like brainwash people to act a certain way, tell them this is what you have to do morally, but that's the only thing we can know for sure. I think this is really strange. The thing that we can't really know for sure about, if people actually died in the French Revolution, because there are so many shades of grey, facts, and who knows. But on the other hand, we can know, like we heard from the government benches, violent revolutions are really good, armed uprisings, violent revolutions are bad, we heard. Armed uprisings from minorities are good. Military intervention in other countries is good. We're not sure how all this works out together, but like, we're fairly really sure about a lot of these things. So, second, we think that like this idea that you can have these like moral paradigms of how things always are is very, very strange. We think that no actions, or almost no actions, are always good. I think as debaters sort of know that like, sometimes intervention might be justified, like World War II was a very good idea, Sierra Leone was a good idea, the Vietnam War probably not such a good idea. With the teaching about the actual reality, the factual difference between these different cases helps people to distinguish whether to do one or the other. With the Nazi example, was a very good case for our side. I think it's good that people know that like anti-Semitic movement will actually gain popularity. So when we see like a racist party springing up and getting popularity, we say, oh, we know that this happened in the past, so we should probably do something against it. But then if we think that like Nazis can only gain power to like, military uprisings, we'll be less prepared to deal with real problems in the actual world. So thirdly, we think that the lines and kids not really giving them like an opportunity to form opinions. We think there's a vast difference between the deliberate lies to children to like manipulate them that we have on their side, and the fact that we on our side might not always know all the facts about everything in our search for better truth. We think like equating these and saying that we'll have lies on both sides is like misleading. So fourthly, we think it's a bit sort of weird that the first government stepped up here and complained about postmodernism and how bad it is that people don't, resolutely think that there's only one way things can be. And the second government comes up and tells us that we can't really know anything, it's really important to be postmodern and think the facts are not really real. I think that's like a weird tension in that we should probably think about. So fifthly, we want to sort of point out, I think we move towards more truthful and more moral sort of outlooks on reality. They stifle this evolution by doing this. And as I pointed out about PY, I still think that it's very strange that Lucy comes up here and she tells us that it's very problematic that in the past, the government falsified history to promote certain moral lessons that they thought were right? White governments in the past that they were civilizing, people in Africa and in Asia, so they like lied about this to teach that moral lesson. Now the solution to this is that the things that we right now think are morally correct, we should manipulate people into believing. I mean, that's like not the correct lesson. I think it would be better to actually tell people how things are, and then see if you can draw the correct conclusions from that, which we think they generally can.
Information?
So, no, thank you. So, going into like the actual points here. So, first of all, I think that governments missed like a very crucial part, like why do we actually need this? Because that's not very clear, right? Beyond governments saying that we should invade other countries more and have more peaceful revolutions, it's not sort of clear exactly what they're achieving by doing this. Are people not that moral? I think that people are more moral now, as we said, than they have been before. I mean, they were doing fairly fine. right? We think sort of, we've given you like a lot of sort of material as well on, you know, other ways of doing this. Like, you know, we have like, you know, stories we can tell them, we have other classes that deal like make it even moral. It's unclear what is the falsify history at this point. So, secondly, can the state decide on what is moral? Well, we sort of the first gave you like stuff about how the state uses for propaganda and so on. We made it sort of don't know what they do. But then Johan gave us like morals need to be applied in reality, right? Like we need to sort of like moral. What is moral depends on what the facts are in a certain situation. For example, let's say you know we're contemplating military intervention, say in a place like Syria. Well, whether intervention is good might depend on how many people would die in it. And looking back, we can say, okay, military intervention in certain situations, say in Vietnam, was not good because of the facts on the ground. In other cases, it was good. By knowing these things that happened in the past, we can decide what is the moral action in the present. And that's quite important. We think it's like you're taking that away from people. So we think like you can't decide what is moral in a vacuum. You can't make the decision without knowing reality. But thirdly, we think that like, sort of even if the state could decide like these things that are moral, would it actually work, this idea of liberty? We think that that's very strange. I first got a PY for me about this, and I don't think they gave a satisfactory answer. So they're thinking that you can tell these people that like, okay, this is what happened in the past, then they grow up, they find out the government liked them, and then they will somehow retain like these moral lessons that you try to give them. The even when smart think this is probably good, because you know they won't trust anyone ever again, and that's really good because you'll be critical minded. We think that that's sort of is a bit weird. I think that's not probably going to help your kids, right? Yes.
We constantly simplify and falsify subjects to teach people the tools that they can use at the time. I mean, for example, according to you, we should teach 6-year-olds that we should teach 6-year-olds particle physics and advanced string theory to explain why this pen has weight. It's because that's what they need to learn.
Okay, thank you. No. I don't think that that's an accurate interpretation of what I said. I think that we may sometimes simplify things in order to like teach something. That's not the same as outright lying about it. I mean, there's a vast difference between these two, and like pretending this and this is kind of misleading. So as Johan gave you, there will be a backlash, because when you teach people certain things and they come out and confront the reality that actually belies that, you get backlash effects. People won't trust to say, they won't even believe this in the first place, right? Like, because these things will spread. Things are like the school children who come to school and not know from, you know, older siblings or their parents at the government will lie to them. I think it's very likely this will actually happen. But then we say, like, even if sort of that worked, would that be? No. We think that, like, it makes us less prepared for reality. As I said that throughout this speech, throughout our speeches, when you confront different situations, you need to know what happened in the past in order to be able to handle them correctly. And we think that, like, second government, you know, most people think that oppressed people can, you know, only be free through violent struggle. We think that that's not good, because since it's not true, they might not become free, because you don't know how you can do it in other ways. I mean, the fooling people this way is really bad. Right. And we also think like basically making people ill-equipped to reach like, you know, better outcomes for them. And we think that knowing that the world is complex makes it easier to see when right and wrong is so rational. Finally, would it be justified? And we think that it wouldn't be justified because lying is generally wrong. Right, Johan gave you how the truth actually is a thing that we do strive for, and that we can sort of attempt to find truths. We update like, you know, what is true when we find out new things, and we need to sort of search for that. And in order to have that, you need to like, you have to have truth to have a sense of reality. It's unjustified for the government to go in and lie to children that trust the government, like to teach them things and use that against them. The thing that lying in the first place presupposes that people actually trust you and will tell the truth, and thus is a fundamentally an unjustified thing to do. And for all these reasons, we're very proud of our position.